November 2022, UNESCO adds the French baguette to its list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The whole country celebrates. The French press runs with it. Bakers open their doors that morning like every morning, and some of them feel, let's say, complicated. Because UNESCO didn't protect the baguette, it protected one specific version of it. And the version most French people actually buy. The one in 70% of all sales. That one doesn't qualify. Same name, different bread, and that split starts with a labor law in 1919. Here is the thing nobody tells you about the baguette. That shape, long, thin, iconic, is not the result of artisanal tradition. It is the result of labor law. In 1919, France passed legislation banning bakers from working before 4 in the morning. Practical problem, because the traditional round loaf, the miche, takes 45 minutes to bake. You cannot start at 4 and have fresh bread ready for the 7 o'clock rush. Impossible. So they changed the shape. A thin loaf bakes in 20 minutes. Baker didn't go thin because it tasted better. They went thin because they had no choice. By August 1920, the word baguette appears in an official text for the first time. A regulation from the Préfecture de la Seine, minimum 80 grams, maximum 40 centimeters, price cap 35 cents. It is not like that anymore. The baguette was, from its very first official moment, a regulated product, not a tradition, a workaround. Now, the Vienna's connection in 1839, an Austrian entrepreneur named Auguste Zang opens a boulangerie viennoise in Paris at 92 Rue du Richelieu. He brings something France doesn't have, the steam oven. That technology, steam injected during baking, is what creates the crackling crust you associate with proper French bread. Zang introduced it. He also brought the pain viennois, which matters. What he did not bring was the baguette. That shape came 80 years later from the labor law. The technology came from Vienna. The shape came from necessity. France turned both into a cultural icon. By the middle of the 20th century, France has roughly 50,000 boulangeries, one in almost every village. Every morning, the same ritual. The baker in before dawn, the loaves out by 7, the neighbors arriving. And here is what most people forget. The baguette was never one thing, it was a family. The ficelle, thin, almost fragile, about 100 grams of pure crust. The name means string. You'd buy it for charcuterie, tear it apart, not bother with a knife. The flûte, between the ficelle and the standard loaf, about 200 grams, the café bread, the one folded under someone's arm on the metro every morning. You know, that image you've seen 1,000 times? That's a flûte, more often than not. The bâtard, shorter, fatter, shaped like a rugby ball, more crumb, less crust, for earthier meal, for serious cheese. And the pain viennois, Auguste Zang's legacy, still present, softer, slightly enriched, almost sweet, not quite the same animal as the others. The breakfast bread, the one for children. All of them made the same way: flour, water, salt, yeast, nothing else. The difference was the shape, the weight, the ratio of crust to crumb. That's it. The same baker making a ficelle and a bâtard on the same morning was using the same dough. Obviously, that's the point. The craft was in the hand, not the recipe. That's not a flow, that's mastery. And then the 70s happened. Supermarket, industrial bakeries, frozen dough shipped overnight, additives that made bread stay soft for 3 days instead of going stale by evening. The price dropped, the convenience was real, and the boulangeries started closing. 50,000 down to 42,000 by 2003, and the 30,000 today. That's not a gradual fade, that's a collapse. The bread that filled those gaps looked identical to what the boulangerie made. Same shape, same color, same name, but made with ascorbic acid, dough improver, emulsifiers, fermented for 2 hours instead of 15, partially frozen, then baked on site to look fresh. This is what got called the Baguette ordinaire. That's not a tradition, that's a factory product with a French silhouette. Stephen Kaplan, a Cornell University historian who spent 50 years studying French bread, who actually trained as a baker himself in 1969 because he took his research that seriously. He said it plainly, the French cannot tell a good baguette anymore. They've just lost the reference point. That's not an insult. That's just what happens when the industrial version owns 70% of the market. Obviously, some bakers pushed back. A small group in the late 80s and early 90s were still doing things the old way, long fermentation, proper flour, proper time. But their problem was the name. They were selling a baguette. The supermarket down the street was selling a baguette. The customer couldn't tell apart. That needed to change. In September 1993, the French government passed a decree, Décret 93-10-74, and it did something simple and radical at the same time. It created a legal definition, the Baguette de tradition française. 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, yeast. That's it. Nothing else is permitted. No additives, no preservatives, no freezing, not the dough, not the finished loaf, not at any stage. Made on site, baked same day, minimum 15 hours between mixing and baking to allow the long, slow fermentation that builds flavor. Break any of those rules, and you cannot call it a tradition. You cannot use the same name. It is to this day the only bread in the world protected by a presidential decree, limiting it to 4 ingredients. Now here's the thing. That decree was a victory, a real one. Artisan bakers finally had a name that meant something. Customer could ask for a tradition and know exactly what they were getting. But the ordinaire didn't go away. You know why? Because it's cheaper. Tradition at an artisan bakery costs around €1.25 today. An ordinaire at a supermarket, 55 cents maximum. When bread is something you buy every single day, that gap matters. 70% of baguettes sold in France today are ordinaire. The tradition is the minority, the protected version, the legally defined one, the one UNESCO endorsed. That's 30% of the market. So back to November 2022. UNESCO inscribes the artisanal know-how and culture of baguette bread on its World Heritage List. The full process they describe, the manual shaping, the long fermentation, the scoring by hand, the same-day baking, that's the tradition, word for word. It matches the 1993 decree. France told the world, this is our bread, and the next morning 70% of France bought the other one. That's not a contradiction. That's just the truth about how culture actually works, You protect what's disappearing. You don't put things on heritage lists because they are thriving. You put them there because you're afraid of losing them. The baguette de tradition is still here. The baker is making it. Fewer every year, but still making it. And if you've never had one, a real one, still warm. The crust shattering when you break it, the crumb open and uneven and slightly sour from the fermentation. You owe it to yourself. Not the frozen one, not the ordinaire, the real thing. Have you ever tasted the difference between the baguette de tradition and a standard one? Did you even know there were two? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have actually noticed. If you want more stories like this, the real history behind what France eats and why it matters, subscribe. New video every week.